The silver blade was 3 inches from his throat when I swung the tire iron. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 12 hours earlier, I was convincing a socialite that her Pomeranian had chakra problems. My name is Vivian Cross, and I am a spectacular liar. Little Duchess has a severely blocked energy meridian, I murmured, stroking the trembling dog while Mrs. Ashworth clutched her pearls in her Beacon Hill parlor. She needs Mozart, filtered spring water, and an elimination diet. Immediately. I knew something was wrong, Mrs. Ashworth gasped, pressing a fat envelope into my palm. I pocketed the cash with a smile that could melt glaciers and headed for the door. Inside my oversized cardigan pocket, Gizmo, my perpetually outraged sugar glider, launched himself to the pocket's rim and let out a shrill, chittering war cry directly at the widow. Oh, what a precious little thing! He was not precious. He was furious. I was already halfway down the cobblestone driveway. The cherry-red 1967 Mustang waited in the afternoon sun like a promise I couldn't afford to keep. I slid behind the wheel, arranged the cash in the center console with trembling fingers, and let out a breath that tasted like desperation. My phone exploded. Tell me you're not stress baking, I said. I am rage-whisking, Vivian. My younger sister Gemma's voice crackled through the speaker. The bank called. They're seizing the Mustang by Friday. Derek's loans are officially defaulting. Derek, my ex-boyfriend. The man who'd forged my signature on 3 commercial leases, maxed out credit lines in my name, then vanished like smoke. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. We'll figure it out, I said, though the words tasted like ash. I just need one big job. Unless some billionaire needs you to psychoanalyze his goldfish, we're finished. Culinary school tuition is due Monday, Viv. You had ramen for dinner. Again. Gizmo scurried onto the console, spread his tiny membrane wings in a dramatic threat display, and let out 2 piercing shrieks at the phone. Even the rodent agrees with me, Gemma muttered. He's a marsupial and he's just hungry. I offer him a slice of dried mango from a tin in the cup holder. He snatched it with both tiny hands and glared at the dashboard while chewing. Keep practicing your pastries. I won't let them take the car. I hung up, tapped my fingers against the leather steering wheel. I needed a miracle. The miracle arrived 97 minutes later. I stared at my laptop screen in my cramped kitchen, reading the email for the 4th time. The subject line, urgent behavioral consultation. The compensation figure had so many zeros I thought my screen was glitching. A reclusive northern estate, a deeply troubled rescue mastiff. GPS coordinates, a non-disclosure agreement, no photographs of the animal. Gizmo glided from the counter to the laptop keyboard, landing with a soft thud. He sniffed the screen, puffed his tiny chest, and let out a dismissive chirp. These rich people have lost their minds, I whispered, already typing my acceptance. But I'm not complaining. The mountain road tried to kill me twice. Smooth highway gave way to gravel switchbacks cutting through ancient pines so tall they swallowed the sky. The Mustang handled it beautifully, but the shadows pressing against my windows made me check the locks 3 times. Then the GPS announced my arrival, and I forgot how to breathe. The compound erupted from the mountainside like a fortress from a dark fairy tale, towering stone walls, reinforced steel gates, and a sprawling glass and timber manor that screamed money loud enough to echo. A man named Calloway met me at the entrance. Tailored suit. No smile. Eyes that scanned me like I was a potential threat and a confirmed disappointment simultaneously. The animal is in the main sitting room, he said. Do not make sudden movements. I'm highly experienced with aggressive pets, I lied. In my pocket, Gizmo pressed himself flat against the fabric, trembling. Calloway led me through a marble hallway lined with abstract art worth more than my apartment building. He stopped at a pair of massive oak doors, pushed them open, and stepped back. Good luck, he said. The doors clicked shut behind me, locked. I stood in an enormous sitting room with vaulted ceilings and an unlit stone fireplace. My attention lasted exactly 1 second on the architecture. Because the creature on the Persian rug was not a mastiff. It was a wolf. A colossal wolf, the size of a small car, draped in midnight black fur with golden hazel eyes that tracked me with an intelligence no animal should possess. My breath stopped. My legs turned to concrete. This is how I die, I thought wildly. Eaten in a luxury mountain fortress because I couldn't pay my rent. I reached behind me, grabbed the brass doorknob. Locked solid. The wolf rose. Its muscles rolled like tectonic plates beneath that dark coat. It stood taller than my waist and took one deliberate step forward. Gizmo detonated. The sugar glider launched from my pocket like a furry missile, spread his membrane wings to maximum span, and dive-bombed the apex predator's face. He landed on the wolf's broad snout, gripped both ears with his tiny hands, and unleashed a blood-curdling screech directly between those enormous golden eyes. The wolf blinked. Gizmo screeched again, louder, then glided back to my shoulder and sat there vibrating with righteous fury, daring the beast to make a move. Here's what I didn't know. The wolf was not a pet. He was Dominic Ashford, Lycan King of the Northern Territories, and he was having the worst week of his immortal life. A rogue alpha named Kessler had poisoned him with a synthesized botanical venom that paralyzed his shifting ability for 72 hours. The fearsome king was trapped in wolf form, unable to speak, command his guards, or rip his enemy apart. Instead, he was being evaluated by a human con artist whose pocket rodent had just landed on his face. But I didn't know any of that yet. What I knew was the giant wolf hadn't eaten me. So I was staying for the paycheck. Okay, I whispered, peeling myself off the door. I sat on the edge of a velvet armchair and opened my clipboard with shaking hands. Your aura is extremely tense. Deep red. Have you considered meditation? The wolf let out a huff that sounded exactly like a scoff. I tossed an organic liver treat across the rug. It bounced off his nose. He stared at it, then at me. Then he twisted his head away in pure, regal disgust. Picky eater, I noted, scribbling. Let's try structured play therapy. I pulled out a neon green squeaky toy and gave it an enthusiastic squeeze. The shriek echoed through the vaulted ceiling. The wolf's ears pinned flat, and he leveled a glare at me that could curdle milk at 40 paces. Gizmo, still perched on my shoulder, puffed up again and released a chattering war cry at the wolf, a tiny general challenging a mountain. The wolf actually tilted his massive head. Something flickered in those golden eyes that looked almost like respect. Then his breathing changed. It went ragged, harsh, wrong. The muscles beneath his coat started twitching violently. A guttural, agonizing groan ripped from his throat, and his spine arched at an angle that shattered every law of biology I'd ever studied. I dropped the toy. Hey, are you okay? You're breathing really... Bones cracked, loudly, wetly. The sound of a body rewriting itself. I clamped both hands over my mouth as the wolf's form contorted, snapped, and dissolved. Fur receded. Limbs lengthened. Joints popped into configurations that shouldn't exist. Where a terrifying beast had been crouching, a man now knelt. A towering, devastatingly sculpted, completely naked man. He pushed dark hair from his face. Golden hazel eyes locked onto mine. The magnetic pull that hit me was so physical I gripped the armrest to keep from stumbling. Please don't scream, he said. His voice was a deep baritone that I felt in my teeth. My name is Dominic. Take a breath. Just breathe with me. I was hyperventilating. My gaze darted from his eyes to his chest to, no. Eyes up. You were a dog, I stammered. A lichen, he corrected gently. A wolf shifter. He paused. Something shifted in his expression, raw, ancient recognition. And you are my destined mate. That word, mate. Between the crushing debt, Derek's betrayal, and the naked mythical king standing on a billionaire's rug claiming I was his destiny, my capacity for reality simply collapsed. I picked up my clipboard, scooped Gizmo off my shoulder and tucked him into my pocket, smoothed my cardigan with violently trembling hands. I'm gonna have to cancel this session, I said flatly. I'm severely allergic to dogs. Silence. Then Dominic laughed, a booming, delighted sound that obliterated his terrifying facade. Good thing I'm a wolf. I bolted. I made it 10 feet down the marble corridor before a blur of motion materialized in front of me. Dominic leaned against the wall, arms crossed, blocking my escape with a charming smirk and absolutely zero clothing. You cannot outrun a lichen, Vivian. Watch me. I didn't escape, but I negotiated. Calloway produced sweatpants. A recovery feast materialized, roasted meats, root vegetables, warm bread, enough food to feed a battalion. Dominic ate like a man who'd been starving for 3 days, which, technically, he had. I sat at the far end of the enormous table, clutching a butter knife like a weapon, and tried to establish normalcy. So, mythical king, secluded mountain fortress. This is your life. Lichen, he corrected again, swallowing steak. And this territory is mine to protect. The isolation keeps my people safe. I paused. I'd expected arrogance. Instead, I heard loneliness, the bone-deep kind I recognized from my own reflection. The mahogany doors burst open. Calloway entered, jaw clenched. Sire. Perimeter alarms triggered. Kessler's scouts are closing fast. Dominic's golden eyes went molten. The gentle man vanished. In his place stood something ancient and lethal. Lock down the estate, he commanded. She stays. Vivian, I corrected. He almost smiled. Vivian stays. I demanded to leave. He demanded I stay where it was safe. I tried climbing out a library window. He was already waiting in the garden below. Highly coordinated, I insisted, straddling the windowsill. Incredibly, he agreed, arms crossed, grinning up at me. Gravity won. He caught my waist as I slipped, steadying me on the library floor. The contact sent electricity cascading through every nerve I owned. He pulled his hands back immediately, a flush climbing his neck. Take me home tonight, I said, breathless and furious. The bank is seizing my car Friday. I have paperwork to file. If you want to protect me, do it in my territory. He studied my face, then nodded. Very well. We arrived at my downtown apartment as streetlights flickered on. Dominic's armored SUV looked absurd, parked on my cracked pavement. Gemma emerged from the kitchen, dusted in powdered sugar, clutching a tray of stress-baked blueberry muffins. She saw Dominic, 6'5" of tactical loungewear and supernatural intensity, and her eyes went glassy. He looks like he bench presses freight trains, she whispered. Then she fainted dead onto the sofa. The muffin tray clattered safely onto the coffee table. Gizmo launched from my pocket, glided to the coffee table, snatched a muffin crumb, and chittered triumphantly at Gemma's unconscious form. Does she do that often? Dominic asked. Only when overwhelmed. He sat gingerly on my thrift store armchair, looking like a marble statue someone had accidentally delivered to a garage sale. I went to double-check the deadbolt and froze. A document was shoved under the door. I pulled it free. Formal eviction notice, signed by Derek's legal team. He hadn't just vanished. He was orchestrating my destruction from the shadows. The apartment, the business lease, the car. He was claiming everything. Vivian? Dominic was already behind me, reading my rigid posture. What is it? I crushed the paper in my fist. He's trying to take everything. I looked up at the Lichen King with fire in my eyes. But I won't let him win. Dominic offered to wire transfer every penny of my debt away before sunrise. Absolutely not, I said, spreading financial records across my dining table with surgical precision. If you pay it off, Derek walks free and I look like an accomplice. I want him exposed in front of a judge. I want him in prison. Then I will have my guards locate him physically. No, I pointed my pen at his chest. I'm going to dismantle his lies with this paperwork. He stared at me. Something shifted behind those golden eyes, not desire, not protectiveness, but awe. She wields a pen like my warriors wield silver blades, he murmured, almost to himself. I caught him staring, offered a small, real smile, the first genuine one I'd given him. Thank you, Dominic, but this is my fight. The terrifying Lichen King looked at the floor, twisted his heavy signet ring, and blushed like a schoolboy. Then his intelligence chief arrived. Elaine was razor-sharp in a tailored suit, carrying a classified briefcase. She spread bank ledgers across my table without ceremony. Your ex-boyfriend isn't just a petty fraudster, Elaine reported. These offshore routing numbers confirm it. Derek is actively laundering territory funds for Kessler. He's financing the rogue faction that wants our king dead. The room went very, very quiet. The next morning, I marched into the Crestmont Valley Central Bank with a thick manila folder and a Lichen King in a midnight blue suit standing silently at my shoulder. The branch manager tried to dismiss me. Dominic simply leaned forward, didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, and the man became wildly cooperative. 45 minutes later, fraud charges were filed. The eviction was frozen. Walking out into the sunlight, I exhaled months of suffocating terror. You handled that brilliantly, Dominic said. Thank you for standing there looking terrifying. It sped up the bureaucracy. He looked away, twisted his ring, blushed again. Then the hair on my neck prickled. Across the street stood Derek, staring directly at us, face white with panic. He locked eyes with Dominic's supernatural aura, took one staggering step backward, and vanished into the crowd. That night, at 2 a.m, Dominic and I sat in my dim living room. Gemma slept. Gizmo dozed in my lap, his tiny membrane wings folded neatly against his body. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It felt like shelter. Derek always told me my dreams were a waste of capital, I admitted softly, staring into my chamomile tea. He ruined my credit, but I refused to let him ruin my future. Dominic's jaw tightened. He is a fool. Your compassion is your greatest strength. What about you? I asked. You rule an entire territory, guards, wealth, power, but you live alone in that fortress. What's that like? He twisted his ring, stared at the floorboards. The crown is isolating. People revere the title but fear the man. I've spent centuries surrounded by courtiers and never been truly known. His gaze lifted to mine. I just want someone who looks at me without trembling. I recognize that loneliness like my own heartbeat. I'm terrified of depending on anyone again, I whispered. But you didn't try to take over today. You just stood beside me. I will never cage you, Vivian. I only want to stand beside you. Gizmo snapped awake. His huge dark eyes went wide. He launched to the windowsill, spread his wings in full threat display, and unleashed a piercing, rattling shriek at the glass. An unnatural shadow blocked the streetlight. Someone was watching us from the fire escape. The window exploded inward. Two massive, feral men lunged through the shattered glass, eyes glowing sickly yellow, hands ending in elongated claws. Kessler's rogues. Dominic didn't shift. He didn't need to. He caught the first attacker midair, crushed him by the throat, and hurled him through the front door. The wood splintered off its hinges, crashing into the hallway. The second rogue slashed for his chest. Dominic ducked, swept the legs, and delivered a single devastating strike that dropped the man like stone. 30 seconds. Both unconscious. Gemma appeared clutching a cast-iron skillet, saw the carnage, and went completely rigid. I sat behind the overturned sofa, trembling, staring at the monsters bleeding on my floor. My careful wall of denial, the one that let me treat this like a manageable situation, crumbled to dust. These creatures had followed us here. They wanted to kill me simply because I stood near him. My quiet life was over. I looked up at Dominic, fearsome king surrounded by deadly enemies, and accepted the truth. We can't stay here, I said. His penthouse occupied an entire skyscraper floor. Panoramic glass walls. Dark hardwood. Absolute fortress. Gemma claimed the commercial kitchen immediately, unpacking her cast-iron skillet and attacking a batch of stressed croissants without a word. Dominic introduced me to his inner council. Patrick for territorial law, Morgan for infrastructure, and Sally, his medical chief. He positioned me at his right side. She is not a guest, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. She is my chosen mate. You will treat her with the same respect you show me. She is my equal in every regard. My breath caught. He wasn't hiding me. He was elevating me. I reached out and squeezed his hand, accepting. 3 days later, I wore a midnight blue silk gown to the territory's formal gathering. Dominic fastened a diamond necklace around my throat, his massive hands impossibly gentle. His fingers brushed my skin and I forgot how to think. You look magnificent, he breathed. I'm terrified. I know. So am I. For one beautiful hour in that crystal chandeliered ballroom, I almost forgot people wanted us dead. Then a voice sliced through the music. Vivian, what on earth are you doing here? Derek, standing by the champagne tower, flanked by 4 enormous men with predator eyes. He'd crashed a supernatural summit to finish what he started. Don't intervene yet, I whispered to Dominic, feeling his chest vibrate with a lethal growl. Let me handle him. I stepped forward, midnight silk, diamond throat, unyielding eyes. I should ask you the same question, Derek. Though I suppose mingling with criminals is your new profession, given your recent hobby of funneling stolen funds into rogue bank accounts. His smug grin cracked. Always dramatic. Did you tell your new sugar daddy you were drowning in debt? You mean the debt you acquired by forging my signature? I let my voice carry. The same debt currently frozen because my legal team submitted your complete offshore laundering dossier to federal authorities? Whispers cascaded through the crowd. Derek's face went scarlet. You think hiding behind monsters makes you untouchable? He snarled, desperation shredding his composure. Kessler promised me a fortune for delivering you. You're leaving with us. I'm leaving with my partner, I corrected. And you're going to prison. Derek's hand shot up. Take them. The 4 enforcers lunged, bones cracking mid-stride. The ballroom became a war zone. Dominic moved like something out of mythology, hurling a rogue through a buffet table that exploded in crystal and splintered wood. Calloway and Elaine fought in lethal synchronization, silver weapons hissing against rogue flesh. I gathered my silk skirt and sprinted behind a marble pillar, heart hammering, watching Dominic systematically dismantle every attacker. He's fighting a war to keep me safe, I realized. He's not a monster. He's a guardian. Then Kessler himself emerged from the shadows, scared face, brutal aura, completely calm. Enjoy this victory, Dominic, the rogue alpha sneered, dragging a cowering Derek toward the exit. I will burn this valley to ash. He vanished into the night. In the SUV back to the penthouse, Dominic wouldn't look at me. His bruised knuckles gripped his knees. His shoulders slumped. He thinks he scared me, I realized. He thinks I see a monster. I retrieved a warm, damp towel from the guest bathroom. approached him at the window where he stood staring at the skyline in quiet shame. "Turn around." He hesitated, then obeyed, kept his gaze down. I pressed the towel to a scrape along his jaw. He flinched, not from pain, from tenderness. "You didn't scare me," I said firmly. "Derek brought those monsters. You made sure we walked out alive." His golden eyes finally lifted, searched my face for fear, revulsion, found neither. "You are remarkably brave, Vivian." Before I could respond, Elaine materialized with satellite imagery. The gala was a distraction. Derek kept his phone on after fleeing. We traced his GPS. I've located Kessler's base, a shipping warehouse on the industrial edge of the valley. The strike team mobilized at dawn. I insisted on joining. Dominic refused. I presented an irrefutable argument. They needed a human to bypass the human security guards without triggering a law enforcement disaster. "I'm a professional con artist," I reminded him. "I can top my way past anyone. You stay in the car the moment guards are down. Deal." Gemma handed Dominic an insulated cooler of tactical sandwiches, roasted turkey, artisan gouda, garlic aioli. He accepted them with genuine reverence. At the warehouse perimeter, I stepped out of the Mustang and marched up to two burly guards and their snarling Rottweiler. "Thank goodness," I gasped, shoving a business card into the nearest hand. "I'm a holistic pet psychic, and this handsome boy has a catastrophically misaligned root chakra. His lumbar aura is screaming." While they stared at me in complete bewilderment, Dominic and Elaine vaulted the perimeter fence like shadows. 90 seconds of improv about canine spiritual blockages. Then I retreated to the Mustang. 10 minutes of silence. Then an explosion of crashing metal, a lichen roar that shook the fog. The loading dock doors blew outward, and dozens of yellow eyes materialized from every surrounding alley. It was a trap. The industrial yard erupted. Dominic and Elaine burst from the wreckage, vastly outnumbered. I threw myself into the driver's seat, gunned the Mustang forward as a moving barricade, and got them to the adjacent parking structure. Then a mechanical click echoed from the catwalk above. "Dominic, above you." Too late. A heavy gauge dart buried itself in his right shoulder. Concentrated liquid silver. He ripped it free, but the poison was already in his blood. The injection site blackened instantly. His knees buckled. The strongest man I'd ever known collapsed to the concrete. Kessler strolled down the ramp, boots echoing like a funeral march. He drew a long blade of pure silver. "Your reign ends on this filthy floor," he sneered, "and your territory is mine." I will never be able to explain what happened inside me in that moment. The paralyzing fear that had followed me through every supernatural encounter simply evaporated. What replaced it was something primal, ferocious, and absolutely certain. I popped the Mustang's trunk, bypassed the flashlight, grabbed the heavy steel lug wrench. Kessler raised his blade over my dying mate. "Any final words, Dominic?" "Look behind you," Dominic rasped through a bloody, defiant grin. I swung the tire iron like a baseball bat directly into Kessler's unprotected knee. The crack echoed through the entire structure. He collapsed screaming, the silver blade clattering harmlessly away. "Don't touch him." I stood over the Lichen King, wrench raised, chest heaving, fully prepared to swing again. Behind me, Dominic stared at my back. Something detonated inside him. The mating bond flaring like a supernova, overriding the silver, flooding him with impossible adrenaline. He roared. Bones cracked. Tactical gear shredded. Midnight fur erupted. The colossal wolf materialized, standing over me, standing with me, and released a howl that shook the building's foundation. The rogues broke and ran. Kessler crawled backward, stripped of his alpha rank by the sheer crushing weight of a true king's dominance. Then the silver won. Dominic's massive wolf form shuddered. His legs buckled. He crashed onto the concrete beside me, his breathing ragged and shallow, the blackened veins from the silver spreading visibly across his shoulder like ink through water. No, I dropped the tire iron and pressed both hands against the wound. His fur was scalding hot. His heartbeat was slowing under my palms. "You do not get to die after that entrance." That was cinematic. "You owe me a sequel." His golden eyes found mine. A low, broken whine escaped his throat. Gizmo scrambled out of my cardigan pocket. I hadn't even realized he was still there, glided onto Dominic's massive heaving side, and began grooming the fur around the wound with frantic, tiny licks, chittering softly as if scolding the poison itself for daring to exist. "Elaine," I screamed into the chaos. "Sally? Anyone!" Sally materialized from the smoke with a field kit, already barking orders into a radio. She dropped beside me, sliced the fur away from the injection site, and jammed a syringe of pale blue liquid directly into the blackened vein. "Colloidal antivenom," she said through gritted teeth. "Hold him still. He weighs 900 pounds. Then hold him emotionally." I cupped his enormous wolf head in both hands, pressed my forehead to his. "Stay with me, Dominic. You promised you'd stand beside me. You don't get to break that promise lying down." His breathing hitched, stabilized. The black veins stopped spreading. Sally exhaled. "He'll live. But he needs 12 hours of total rest and more antivenom. We need to move him now." They carried him, still in wolf form, too weak to shift, on a reinforced military stretcher into an armored transport vehicle. I rode in the back with his head in my lap, one hand buried in his dark fur, the other holding Gizmo against my chest. The sugar glider had stopped chittering. He sat perfectly still on my knee, his huge dark eyes fixed on Dominic's face, one tiny hand resting on the wolf's ear. It was the quietest Gizmo had ever been. Back at the penthouse, they laid him on a massive reinforced bed in the medical suite. Sally administered 3 more rounds of antivenom through the night. I refused to leave. Gemma brought me coffee, blankets, and a plate of fresh croissants that I couldn't taste. At 3:47 a.m., the black fur receded. Bones shifted with soft, exhausted cracks. The wolf dissolved, and Dominic lay human again, pale, scarred, breathing steadily. His eyes opened. "Found me immediately?" "You hit an alpha lichen with a tire iron," he whispered, voice destroyed. He was being rude. A broken laugh. He winced, pressing a hand to his bandaged shoulder. "You saved my life. You saved mine first. Multiple times. I owed you a turn." He reached for my hand. I gave it. His grip was weak but warm. "I meant what I said, Vivian. Every word. I will never cage you. I will never diminish you. I just want to stand beside me. I know." I squeezed his hand. "I'm staying, Dominic, not because destiny says so, because I say so." His golden eyes glistened. The fearsome Lichen King, slayer of rogues, ruler of the Northern Territories, pressed his face into my palm and let out a shaking breath. Gizmo chose this precise moment to glide from the bedside table, land on Dominic's bare chest, and curl into a tiny ball directly over his heart. He let out one soft, contented chirp, the first non-aggressive sound I had ever heard him make. Dominic looked down at the sugar glider, then up at me. "I think he finally approves of me," he murmured. "Don't get cocky. He bit Calloway yesterday." 3 weeks later, Derek was arrested at JFK International Airport attempting to board a flight to Sao Paulo. Federal agents, tipped off by an anonymous dossier containing every forged document, laundered transaction, and offshore routing number, intercepted him at the gate. The footage went national. I watched it on Gemma's phone while eating her freshly baked almond financiers and felt absolutely nothing. Then I felt everything. I cried for 20 minutes into a throw pillow while Gemma held me and Gizmo sat on my head, grooming my hair with fierce, tiny hands. "He's gone," Gemma whispered. "It's over." It was over. The recovered territory funds, combined with my legitimate consulting income, allowed me to open a real practice, Cross and Companion Animal Rehabilitation Clinic, specializing in behavioral therapy for supernatural creatures and their familiars. The first week, I treated a vampire's anxious tabby cat, a fey diplomat's territorial parrot, and a warlock's emotionally codependent bearded dragon. Gizmo supervised every session from his custom hammock above my desk, maintaining quality control through a system of approving chirps and disapproving shrieks. The bearded dragon received 4 consecutive shrieks. I had to reschedule. Gemma graduated culinary school top of her class and opened a bakery on the ground floor of the clinic building. The croissants became legendary. Calloway placed a standing weekly order and pretended it was for staff morale purposes. The International Lichen Summit convened 8 months later in a glass-walled conference hall overlooking a frozen mountain lake. 12 territorial alphas from 4 continents gathered to negotiate a mutual defense treaty against rogue faction remnants. Dominic sat at the head of the table. I sat at his right. Alpha Sergei Volkov, 7 feet of Siberian muscle and diplomatic hostility, slammed his fist on the mahogany table, rattling crystal water glasses. "A human queen?" he bellowed, canines extending. "This is unprecedented. This is an insult to..." A tiny shape glided silently from my jacket. Gizmo landed on the polished table with a soft tap. He straightened to his full 4-inch height, his enormous dark eyes locked onto Volkov's scarred face. The entire room went still. Gizmo spread his membrane wings to maximum span, a threat display roughly the size of a cocktail napkin, puffed his minuscule chest, and unleashed a single ear-splitting shriek directly into the Siberian Alpha's face. Volkov recoiled. Gizmo held eye contact for 3 more seconds. Then he folded his wings, waddled to the center of the table, sat directly on top of the unsigned treaty, and fell asleep. 12 Alpha stared at the sleeping sugar glider. Then at me. Then at Dominic. Dominic shrugged. She comes with security. Volkov signed the treaty. They all did. That night, standing on the penthouse balcony with the city glittering below, Dominic pulled me against his chest. His heartbeat was steady and strong, no poison, no pain, just warmth. You know, I murmured, when I drove up that mountain, I thought the worst thing in my life was a forged signature and a stolen car. And now? Now I run a supernatural veterinary clinic, my sister is a celebrity pastry chef, and my sugar glider just intimidated 12 world leaders into a peace treaty. I tilted my head up to look at him. My life is objectively insane. He kissed my forehead. Do you regret it? Gizmo glided from the railing to Dominic's shoulder, curled against his neck, and let out a tiny, sleepy chirp. I smiled. Not for 1 second.